Ashoka left for her to worry about. "I'm just trying to help," Riya said, a small frown creasing her forehead. Vira forced herself to take a deep breath, stuffing down her muddled feelings. "I'm sorry. You are helping. I'm just tired." It wasn't a lie. Being the Maharani of a dying country was exhausting. Every day her council brought her some new problem. News of Lyrian troop movements, a part of the border wall running out of magic, protesters gathering outside the Devar fort. Ashoka was a country built on magic, a resource mined from the single quarry beneath the Devar palace, carefully processed by Mayaka, those who worked with magic, and put into objects. Magic was what powered carriages, transported messages, and lit the city. It was what protected Ashoka from invaders. It was woven into the weapons used by the military and the walls that made up the country's borders. Or at least it had been. As the Maharani, Vira knew exactly how little was left in the quarry. 3 weeks. That was all they had before the border would fully crumble, leaving Ashoka defenseless. Finding the Ivory Key was supposed to solve Vira's problems. Instead, it had led her to disappointment after disappointment, and she wasn't sure she could handle another one, not when her heart was still too raw from what had happened during their trip to Ritzur. What had happened after. Her chest tightened painfully, but she pushed that aside too. The door opened into a cramped cavern. Dim chandeliers cascaded from the high ceiling, illuminating stone walls that had been sanded down and carved with elaborate geometric designs. Low wooden tables dotted the room, each surrounded by a ring of embroidered cushions. Some were occupied by sole patrons, sipping from a tankard of ale or wine. Others held groups clustered together, playing cards or talking in hushed voices. Lilting music emanated from one corner, where a sitar player seated on a rug-covered dais was strumming a lively tune. Riya cast a furtive glance around as they approached the bar. "This doesn't look like the kind of place that many scholars would frequent." Vira didn't respond, but she secretly agreed. She and Riya were dressed simply in cotton kurtas without any jewelry or fine silk that would attract attention or indicate that they were worthwhile targets for robbery, but Vira could still feel gazes lingering on her. It hadn't escaped her notice that the clientele was heavily armed, talvars, aruvals, and daggers resting on the ground beside their tables. She had a talvar too, a plain curved sword that she'd brought along at Riya's insistence, but she'd never intended to actually need it. "What'll you have?" The barkeep's Gajo-lined eyes flickered up impatiently to Vira, and then back to where she was wiping the sticky counter with a dirty rag. It didn't look to be making much of a difference. "We're actually looking for someone," Riya said. "Sharda." That earned them the barkeep's full attention. She dropped the rag and stared at them, one hand on her hip as her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Who's asking?" "Some old friends." Vira put 5 shiny sares on the counter, ignoring Riya's incredulous look. "Sharda doesn't have friends," the barkeep said. But a moment later, she jerked her chin to the right, where a tunnel led deeper into the cavern. "Try through there." Vira heard the roar of a crowd. They emerged in a smaller cave where people were clustered around a table. Riya elbowed her way in first, and Vira followed, standing on her toes to look over Riya's shoulder. It was a game of cards. On one end was a broad-shouldered young man, the heavy rings on his fingers twinkling as he rearranged his cards. On the other side was a woman who looked youthful despite streaks of gray in her long black braid. And in the middle, atop of what was surely hundreds of glinting sares and tolas, was a carved wooden flute. It didn't look to be worth much, but Vira could feel the faintest hint of magic wafting from it. Another cheer rose up as the young man set his cards on the table. Vira was too far away to make out what they were, but judging by the response, it was a good hand. A hush fell over the crowd as the woman leaned forward.